we are in the middle of a conversation with Dave and John, and both came out of Germantown Baptist Church in Memphis. They came there through the sports and rec and fitness ministry, and we're talking about how do we recruit missionaries for local missions in the sports, rec, and fitness of the church. So far, what we've covered is that we have to know what we need. How many coaches do we need for a league? Or how many teachers do we need for a class, fitness set of classes? How many do we need? And we create our laborers list based on Matthew 9, that it talks about the harvest is ripe. Pray to the Lord of the harvest that he would send out the laborers. And we started to talk, when do we start contacting those people? And these gentlemen helped us understand it starts immediately upon a league ending, that you take your core coaches from that league and put them on that list for next year, knowing you're probably going to lose a couple of them every year to year, and you're going to need to recruit some more. And now we're talking about what do we do going from there forward. So John and Dave, welcome back.
Thank you.
Thanks for spending some time with us. We are together at the Leedy Memorial Golf Marathon, that people are out here playing golf, and they are raising money so that students for sports ministry could actually get scholarships to universities, and even some people getting scholarships to go to some of our conferences like the Reach Gathering. So we're here today. Obviously we're not golfing now, and so the course is not going to be damaged any further.
Correct.
Because we're up here. But Dave, you were the sports and rec person, the director of that ministry. You brought John on, and you were helping us understand it starts right away. And you said that you actually sent emails, and I doubted that, but you say you really were doing emails.
My last church, their email had been invented.
Yes. So not like Al Gore. It wasn't invented at his
Yes.
church, but it was during that time.
Correct.
So now you go, and you've got this list, and you've got a few people, but you still got a few more. What do you do there? These are blanks. They don't have names beside them.
That's when I start talking to people. I make promotions for prayer requests. I'm looking for new coaches. I mention it in church meetings when I have opportunities. It's one of those things that I just keep at the forefront, because the more people I share with about these needs, the more likely I'm going to have someone say, my husband can do that, or I know this guy that's not real active in the church, but he's a believer. I think he can help you. You just start picking up people like crazy.
And we talked last podcast about the criteria for those leaderships. So if you're interested in that, go back to the last podcast. Now, and John, when you are involved in filling out those names and getting that roster complete, do you communicate to those people any specific thing?
The ones who are already, the ones I'm looking for, the ones who have already
committed? How do they even know your criteria? How do they even know that you're considering them?
Well, we communicate that, on the front end. We tell them what the expectations are. I don't want anyone to step into a coaching role and be surprised halfway through the season that we want them to share the gospel.
This is a key point.
They need to know that from the very beginning. So during the recruitment process, we'll talk a little bit about expectations. One of the things that we do at Germantown Baptist is to draft teams, and we do that for a lot of reasons, but one is so I don't have coaches that come back and fuss at me about the quality of their team. They picked the team. So during the draft, that's when we have our coaches meeting. It's more time-consuming for me, but every coach is going to be there at every draft, and so I know there's 100% participation. And during that time, we'll talk about what expectations we have, what they can expect from me, what I expect from them, everything from communication, logistical types of things, uniforms, whatever we need, schedules, anything that we need to talk about. But we also talk about sharing the gospel, how they do that, how I can equip them to do that, and what we want to see from that as we go through the season. And one of the things that a lot of our church sports teams will do is to wait until the end of the season to share the gospel at a team party. And from the very beginning, I try to convince them not to wait until then, because they've got a season in which to develop a relationship, take advantage of that, and relatively early or halfway through the season, but certainly no later than that, share the gospel. And then you've got some time in the remainder of the season to have kids and families follow up if they have questions, want more information. Because chances are they may or may not interact with that coach after the season is over. And so we provide that opportunity for them.
Philip didn't wait till the end of the chariot ride with the Ethiopian to give him the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
It happened right then. And sometimes we just have to be Spirit-led and say, oh, it's not the end of the year, but yes, you can come to Jesus today.
Yeah.
And so that's a great point.
One of the things I'll challenge my coaches to do as well is to share with the parents and the families that are involved.
Mm-hmm.
If David and I are coaching together, he might get with the kids and share the gospel with them. And every parent wants to know what a coach is telling his kid. So if he's doing that, I'll get with the parents to say, Coach David is sharing the gospel. He's going to share his faith story. And here are some things that he's going to tell them. And so I'll walk through a gospel presentation with the parents and family members that are there. And they've heard what Coach David is telling the kids, and they've also heard the gospel. So we're expanding the ministry.
Okay, so we've got this list. We've got a few names. We're going to start praying about those people that we don't even have their name down. Lord, bring the people in.
Mm-hmm.
Then we communicate with them. If you're signing up for this, this is what the expectations are, so there's no surprises. Now they're there. What do you do? How do you equip them? What do you do with those coaches? Dave, what did you do when you were there?
We had certain workshops, was it National Youth?
NYSCA.
NYSCA that we operated. They went through
National
a little workshop.
Youth Sports Coaches Association.
Yes.
We think it's still in existence, and you can get great training. It's sports-specific,
Correct.
age-specific.
Correct. We would actually have them go through that if they were first-time coach,
Mhm.
so they could get a good grip on it. We heavily dosed them in philosophy. By philosophy meaning, this is what we're about. We want you to have the kids try their best, but we don't want you to do so in a way that it harms self-esteem. We want to build children up. And so we would basically communicate through the coaches what we would want to tell the children, or what we would want the end of the season to look like from a child's point of view.
So you had this training at the beginning of the year, and you were going to add something to that, and then I'm going to ask you, is there anything that you do during the year or after the year with that training?
This may tie into both, because one of the things I'll offer new coaches is the ability to be mentored by someone who's coached previously. For example, we have
Great
people
point.
in our ministry who may have grown up with their kids as coaches, and year after year after year have coached, and now their kids are in high school, or their kids are out of the house entirely, and many are willing to step back into a mentoring role where they know they don't have to be at every practice and every game, but they're willing to show up at a few practices or a couple of games, and will give the new coach some pointers and some ideas to help them know how to run a practice and how to effectively coach during the game.
Now, in a busy Western world particularly, we've got coaches that are needing training, they need ongoing encouragement, they need all that. And the last thing that they want to do is have to listen to a nagging spouse say, why are you going back over to that church again? And one of the things I know that some folks have worked out is if you have 4 games, you've got 8 teams in your league, you've got 4 games, that during game 2, the coaches from game 1 and game 3 meet together. And during game 3, the coaches from game 2 and 4 meet together. You just do the same training, the same encouragement, whatever communication. But now they're only committing a little extra time on that day.
Mm-hmm.
They might add an extra half
That's a good
hour to
point.
an hour so that they can receive that. I've heard other people that do it during a Sunday school class or an adult Bible fellowship hour, that they do this for a set amount of weeks. They've also heard them do it Saturday morning for a week or 2. But some of our millennials are saying, I don't even want to meet with you. How can we do this? And they post it electronically and have to go through
Right.
and what have you. Any thoughts about any of those?
all of those are great ideas, and I think you have to do what works for your church and for your people. And
Great point.
what works at my church may not work at yours, and what works at yours may not work at mine. But if you know your people and you know their schedules and their needs, there are enough tools, enough resources out there that you can find something that fits their needs. And so whether it's communicating all of that at the initial draft or providing ongoing training between games or having podcasts or different resources available, there are so many options that there's something that will work for your church and for your people.
What's the biggest thing? What's the one thing that you want people watching or listening to this podcast to know about recruiting people and keeping them?
That's tough. I would say one of the things is affirmation and encouragement, helping and equipping. Equipping is really key. If they know what's expected, you communicate well throughout the season and then follow up after the season, and you continue to communicate as you head into the next season. That's important. But they need to be affirmed. They need to be encouraged. And I think if they understand the role that they have in the ministry and the potential for fruit that's there and the impact that they're having on children and families, that goes a long way toward making them feel valued and encouraged to participate again the next year.
Listening to what you just said, if you're familiar with the love languages, there's some of those people that are going to need a handwritten note from you because they love words of affirmation, or in their ear. Some of them are going to need a gift because that's their language.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them are just going to need you to come alongside of them and be with them because they like spending time with you because that communicates. Mm-hmm. We have to recognize that our coaches and volunteers are not a one-size-fits-all. And it's because we spin out of our spiritual gift or our love language, we expect everybody else. One last thing here. How do you grab hold of the key volunteer and staff? What did you look for in John?
This is the dartboard,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I just lined up pictures and threw darts and it hit him. No, when I was on staff and was trying to find a new associate, which was basically our director of sports and drama ministries, it's a unique combination, and I was willing to give up on the drama because our sports ministry was so large at the church. I did the normal staff recruitment of putting out the word, collecting resumes from all over the nation. But our pastor was encouraging us to look inward, find people that are already connected to the church, connected to the mission of what we were trying to do. And I just couldn't get this guy's name and face out of my head. And it was a 2 or 3 week process for me. And finally one morning I just said, I'm going to take the shot and call him. And so I called him up and said, have you ever thought about a career in recreation ministry? And then I'll let him tell his side of the story.
Well, I had been struggling with that for a while, but to keep the story short, in a time of prayer, the night before that phone call, I had a list of strengths and weaknesses and where I thought God could best use me, and we know how that often works. I threw that up, and not literally, but I tore that up and just told the Lord, you know all of this. I'm here, I'm available, I'll do what you want me to do and go where you want me to go. My yes is on the table. And so the pressure was off me at that point. And as I walked into my office in downtown Memphis the next morning, the phone was ringing, and it was this gentleman. And
I thought he knew you.
Yeah. He's being polite.
He asked that question, have you ever thought about? And my answer was no. The truth was I never had considered working in recreation ministry. But I said, but this is how the Lord's been at work in my life, and we began talking, and a few months later, I came on board as his associate.
In our Friends tradition, my church background, we say that only God ordains. So we don't ordain our clergy. We call them recorded pastors because we say that I see God's ordination in your life, which is what you saw in John. Mm-hmm. And you went up to him and tapped him on the shoulder and said, I see God's ordination. Can I record that? Can I put your name down? that you're going to go and become this new sports minister.
It's a good way of putting it.
And so you would really make a good Quaker.
Well, nice.
But that's really, it's a funky little different slant, but I rather like it that we can see that. And for you that are out there listening and watching this, think about who needs to be on your laborers list for every one of your leagues. And what are you going to do to train them and equip them and encourage them to keep them going? And who out of that is God calling to go into a full-time vocational ministry? You can make a difference in someone's life. John is here today because Dave reached out and said, you could be the next person. Who is it that God's calling you to tap on the shoulder and say, I see God's ordination. Can I record that ordination? Thanks for joining us here. I thank both of you for being involved and taking your time out from the golf course today and spending a few moments. Hopefully it's been beneficial to everybody that's listening here on this podcast that CSRM and Seed Ministries co-produce. Thanks for joining us.